Coming live from the studio, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for watching another episode of All Sports. This is your host Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, and NHL hockey. Before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. To start off with Major League Baseball, on Wednesday, May 19th, during the Tigers-Mariners game, Spencer Turnbull threw a no-hitter. This is the first no-hitter for the Tigers since 2011. The Mariners became the fourth team in Major League Baseball history to get no-hit twice in a 2-week span. On Thursday, May 20th, during the Yankees-Rangers game, Corey Kluber threw a no-hitter. This is the 8th time in Major League Baseball history that no-hitters were thrown one or fewer days apart from each other. So we're not even through the first 2 months of the season, and we have already had 6 no-hitters. And they all happened in the first few weeks of the season. Something like that has never happened before. And we've had no-hitters happen back-to-back days, which has only happened a few times. But the amount of no-hitters that have already happened this season is pretty amazing. Also, there's 3 teams that if you play those 3 teams, those are the ones that have been getting no hit. And it's happened to them twice already. The Rangers, the Mariners, the Indians. Those 3 teams, if you go against them, you're likely going to throw a no-hitter. And it has already happened twice against those 3 teams. So it's pretty amazing to see how many no-hitters have already happened, but that it has happened against those specific teams more than once. So we'll have to wait and see if there's more no-hitters throughout the rest of the 2021 season, but so far there has already been 6 through the month of May. Shohei Ohtani is the only player with 15 plus home runs and 50 strikeouts in the same season. In the Major League Baseball power rankings, the current top 10 Major League Baseball teams are the Padres, Rays, White Sox, Red Sox, Giants, Dodgers, Athletics, Cardinals, Astros, and Yankees. Moving on now to NFL football, Jeff Driscoll and the Texans have agreed to a 1-year contract. So far, throughout the last few weeks and possibly going into the next few weeks before training camp begins, not a lot has happened in the NFL. Right now, OTAs are underway, and now that we're going into June, minicamp will happen, and then after that, there will be a break until training camp begins at the end of July. But now that we are heading into June, trades can happen. And there are specific players that could possibly be traded. It's probably not going to happen right on June 1st. But now that June 1st is approaching and going forward up until training camp and possibly into the season, trades can happen. We're going to have to wait and see if any trades happen. Some names you definitely want to keep an eye on is Aaron Rodgers, Julio Jones, and Deshaun Watson. Those trades could possibly still happen now that June 1st is going to pass, and we're just going to have to wait and see what happens in the NFL going into the next few weeks. Moving on now to NBA basketball, Jordan Clarkson was named the 2020-2021 NBA Sixth Man of the Year. Jordan Clarkson became the first Jazz player to win this award. Julius Randle was named the 2020-2021 NBA Most Improved Player. Russell Westbrook moved into 3rd on the all-time triple-doubles list in the playoffs. James Harden moved into 5th on the all-time three-pointers made list in the playoffs. Kevin Durant moved into 9th on the all-time scoring list in the playoffs. Kevin Durant moved into 10th on the all-time free throws made list in the playoffs. Kevin Durant moved into 15th on the all-time field goals made list in the playoffs. Chris Paul moved into 17th on the all-time assist list in the playoffs. Chris Paul moved into 18th on the all-time steals list in the playoffs. Danny Green moved into 12th on the all-time three-pointers made list in the playoffs. Trae Young became the fourth player in NBA history to get 30 points and 10 assists in his playoff debut. Now that we are heading towards the end of May and going into June, the regular season has come to an end, and it is now time for the NBA playoffs. It's one of the best times of the year, and the NBA playoffs never get old. It's always the best basketball that is played, and it's always very interesting to watch because anything could happen. It doesn't matter what team it is. Every team that makes it into the playoffs in both the Eastern and Western Conference have a chance at making it to the NBA Finals and possibly winning the NBA Finals. So it's a great time of year for the NBA. Now, if we take a look at the current NBA standings in the Eastern and Western Conference, these are the teams that made it into the playoffs. And here are your top 8 teams in the Eastern and Western Conference that made it into the playoffs. To start off in the Eastern Conference, the 76ers were the number 1 seed, the Nets were the number 2 seed, the Bucks were the number 3 seed, the Knicks were the number 4 seed, the Hawks were the number 5 seed, the Heat were the number 6 seed, the Celtics were the number 7 seed, and the Wizards were the number 8 seed. In the Western Conference, the Jazz were the number 1 seed, the Suns were the number 2 seed, the Nuggets were the number 3 seed, the Clippers were the number 4 seed, the Mavericks were the number 5 seed, the Trailblazers were the number 6 seed, the Lakers were the number 7 seed, and the Grizzlies were the number 8 seed. So those were the teams that made it into the playoffs in the Eastern and Western Conference. Now if we take a look at the matchups we have in the first round of the playoffs for both the Eastern and Western Conference, to start off in the Eastern Conference, we got the 76ers going against the Wizards, the Knicks going against the Hawks, the Bucks going against the Heat, and the Nets going against the Celtics. In the Western Conference, we got the Jazz going against the Grizzlies, the Clippers going against the Mavericks, the Nuggets going against the Trailblazers, and the Suns going against the Lakers. So those are the matchups for the first round of the playoffs. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. Now that it's the playoffs, anything can happen. Every team has a chance at making it all the way to the end. And we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But the playoffs is definitely interesting to watch no matter what team you root for. It's always very entertaining. Anything can happen. And when it comes to the playoffs, no matter what league it is, expect the unexpected. I can't wait to see what happens during the playoffs. In this season, almost any team that's in the playoffs this year has a chance at reaching the NBA Finals and possibly winning the NBA Finals. And we're going to have to wait and see what 2 teams make it to the NBA Finals and what team wins the NBA Finals. But there is a great chance that it's going to be teams that make it all the way to the end that you weren't expecting. And the team that possibly wins the NBA Finals this season will probably be a team that you weren't predicting to win it all. But now that it's the playoffs, anything can happen, and it's a great time of year, especially if you're a fan of the NBA. And I can't wait for the playoffs to begin. So that's the current NBA standings in the Eastern and Western Conference. Moving on now to NHL hockey. So now that the NHL regular season has come to an end, it's now time for the Stanley Cup playoffs, and it's a great time of year for the NHL now that the playoffs are getting ready to begin. And just like in any other league, now that it is time for the playoffs, anything can happen, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens. But I can't wait to see what happens during the playoffs and what 2 teams make it to the Stanley Cup final and what team wins the Stanley Cup final. So right now I'm going to update you with the current NHL standings in the Eastern and Western Conference, and we're going to take a look to see what teams made it into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now taking a look at the Stanley Cup playoffs, here are the teams that made it into the playoffs for both the Eastern and Western Conference. We had the Penguins, the Islanders, the Capitals, the Bruins, the Hurricanes, the Predators, the Panthers, and the Lightning make it into the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. We had the Avalanche, the Blues, the Golden Knights, the Wild, the Maple Leafs, the Canadiens, the Oilers, and the Jets make it into the playoffs in the Western Conference. Now that we know what teams made it into the playoffs, here are the matchups in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We have the Penguins going against the Islanders, the Capitals going against the Bruins, the Hurricanes going against the Predators, and the Panthers going against the Lightning in the Eastern Conference. We have the Avalanche going against the Blues, the Golden Knights going against the Wild, the Maple Leafs going against the Canadiens, and the Oilers going against the Jets in the Western Conference. Now that we know the matchups for the Stanley Cup playoffs, we're going to have to wait and see what happens and what teams advance further into the playoffs. And it's a great time of year for the NHL. Regardless of what team you root for, now that it's time for the Stanley Cup playoffs, we're going to have to wait and see what happens. Anything can happen. And to tell you the truth, all these teams that made it into the Stanley Cup playoffs have a chance at making it all the way to the end. And we're going to have to wait and see what two teams go up against each other in the Stanley Cup final and what team wins the Stanley Cup final. But honestly, there's teams that are favored to make it all the way to the end. But all these teams that made it into the Stanley Cup playoffs really have a chance at reaching the Stanley Cup final and potentially winning the Stanley Cup. And we're going to have to wait and see what happens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I can't wait to see what happens now that it is time for the playoffs in the NHL. So that's the current NHL standings in the Eastern and Western Conference. Moving on now to the show, what to watch for this week in sports: the NBA playoffs, the Nuggets, NBA basketball, the Stanley Cup playoffs, the Avalanche, NHL hockey, the Rockies, Major League Baseball. Moving on now, on the next show, I will talk about NFL football, Major League Baseball, NBA basketball, and NHL hockey. I hope you all have a great week. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next week. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.